Disney's live-action movies typically aren't considered scary. They aren't even thought of as particularly spooky, ghostly, or mysterious. However, there is one that comes to mind when we think of Halloween. If you've ever been alone in the woods, had that creepy feeling like someone's watching you, then maybe you can relate with the kids in this week's movie, The Watcher in the Woods. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We have another episode of the Buena Vista Boys for you, and today's show is our Halloween episode, our very first Halloween episode. And because it's Halloween, to celebrate probably the greatest holiday that's ever existed, aside from my birthday, is Matt's pick of The Watcher in the Woods, the 1980s Disney classic horror movie that I would argue is 90% on the way to being a true cult classic horror flick, Matt. That's my argument to you.
Well, finally, I picked something that you liked because I was getting wailed on early on for some of my choices. But I'm glad that this worked out for both of us. And yeah, I'm glad that we're talking about it because we really should get this out more. It's good.
The fact that you picked a good movie or the fact that it's a good movie in general?
Absolutely. Both. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, all right.
No, but I'm like, if you like, movies in the vein of like The Haunting, I think this does a pretty good job of getting the hairs on the back of your neck.
Yeah, and a few times I'm sitting there watching it going, this is a Disney movie. This is crazy to me, and reading some of the critical reviews, which we'll get to afterwards, of course, like we always do. A lot of people were sort of shocked at how Disney took something really cool and kind of made a Disney spin on it. And we'll get to that again later. But for the most part, it is unlike any Disney movie that I've seen. And this was the Ron Miller Productions area of film where they're like, oh, we need to capture the young adult, audience.
Yeah.
And it's clear. And they do such a good job at it.
Yeah.
That's what gets me.
It has all of its classic, Disney pedigrees, though. It's it's got your Buena Vista opening, and it has your close family stuff going on.
The nuclear family at this point.
But it does. It kind of starts out like that, but then it does kind of grow this edge to it almost right away, which is nice. That kind of sets it apart.
Agreed. Well, let's get into it because I'm pretty excited about this. This was one of the few movies that I was having to watch around whenever my kid was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I need to make sure that she's not, because she's 6. And this movie does lean very heavily on point of views and cinematography really to set the tone. And then, of course, you have the music, the soundtrack. And those two things combined really, really work. There's nothing like overtly scary to look at, but both of those things, the sights and sounds, I didn't want to like freak her out, which also, again, feels weird going back to that. This is a Disney movie.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, where you kind of need to lock in on it to really get the experience. You can't be passive watching it. You sort of have to sit and let yourself get into the atmosphere so that it can scare you the way it's trying to.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I get that. And it is very, you go back and you watch some of those old horror movies from like the 70s and early 80s. And it is that almost low budget style filmmaking where it feels very familiar. Even like I've never seen this movie before this. And watching it felt very familiar, either because they're taking shots from these movies like Halloween or whatever that have this sort of low angle, shots, these quick cuts or whatever, or, maybe it set the tone for it or maybe just happened to be right in the middle of it. Yeah. And I don't know. It felt comfortable to watch.
Yeah. Some of the shots where, they're kind of doing the rustling trees and you kind of have that floating eye camera. A lot of that felt like they almost ripped it from Sam Raimi a little bit. Like, I can't remember. Evil Dead came out, I think, a little bit later.
I think later, yeah.
But that felt like very pre-Raimi of that scary character kind of whipping through the trees.
I call it murder POV is what I called it in my notes. So you'll hear that. You'll hear that a lot. Well, I think we should stop watching each other talk about it. And let's talk about it some more. I don't know. Let's get into it.
Enough with the yammering.
This movie for me opened like a legit scary movie. It has a forest of gnarled trees, and our view is kind of blocked here and there by something or someone, while a creepy music box plays some haunting tunes. A classic horror orchestral hit dips in and out as the forest shots kind of change. And I want to play some of the opening, mainly for just the audio, because I think it's really great. They did a really good job.
It sets up the hauntingness of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And that specifically, the
yeah,
that is just classic for me. That's horror movie tune. That is horror. We're at the horror movie time.
That got my the back of my neck feeling away.
And you're like, oh my god, something's behind me. Yeah, the opening shots here are great. The forest they found is perfect for this, and because these don't look like any trees that you would normally see, especially in a cluster like a forest. And I'm in. I'm in all the way right now.
Yeah, I didn't throw it in our notes because I didn't know how much people would care about forests, but this is a very famous and incredibly old forest.
I think by default, all forests are old, right?
I suppose so, but they specifically mentioned this one in Buckinghamshire is very old, very ancient.
I love that. We fade in from this shot to a little European car zipping down a classic English countryside road. In the car, we find 5 people, a man driving, of course, I mean, it's the 80s, an older woman next to him, and in the backseat, 2 kids and a mom. The older lady is the real estate agent, and she's taking them to see a house for rent. We must be way out in the boonies somewhere because the mom says this one seems rather isolated. This, meaning this one that they're going to go see, right? She says it's rather isolated. And the agent replies, quote, secluded, I'd say. just marketing 101. So by the way, also, this is shot in England. Yeah. So everybody is English except for the family, but also sometimes I think that they might be because it's again one of those movies where the accents are all over the place.
Yeah, I think the dad is English, and that's how they got there. That's what I took from it.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Also, that lady, she's doing a thing called selling through simile.
We get a low angle cut on the car entering an old gated drive with dead leaves everywhere, overgrown bushes in the sides. Then our point of view switches and we see the car coming down the path towards us, but something is a little different. Our view is moving and shifting, and it actually retreats all the way back into the bushes to hide itself from the car, which is what we were talking about in the intro. Very classical 80s horror stuff. You know what I mean? You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've ever seen a movie with the murder POV, that's what we're talking about. The mood here is enhanced by the brass-driven score. So we already know, kind of based on the camera and the music, that this isn't going to go well for the family. Like they're telling you within a minute and a half, this is the key family. This person, whenever we switch to this point of view, something bad's going to be happening, and buckle up, kind of thing.
All signs point to death.
Right. What I love about this shot is that it's one shot. It's maybe 30 seconds in total. But I think it tells us so much about what we can expect from this movie. So as the car passes us, right, the camera pokes out. We're still in the camera shot, right? We pull back, the car passes, the camera pokes out, swivels, looks at the rear of the car as it continues down the road. And then it crosses the road and we keep going with it. into the brush and the low forest of the surrounding area. We wind around a couple large ferns, weaving deftly around, and it gave me the sense that whatever's watching this family knows the area very, very well. So already it feels like, okay, the family's going to be at a disadvantage to whatever's watching them in the woods. That's what I'm assuming based on the title, knowing nothing about what this movie is about.
Yeah.
We exit the woods and we slowly creep in on a large house as the car we just saw pulls up to the house. So this point of view is going to be our bad guy, is what I'm saying. And our bad guy knows exactly how to move around this bit of land fast and undetected. So I love it. I'm locked in. This is a great way to open a horror movie. You don't have to faff around with it. You just, we already know, number one, it's secluded. Number two, there's a lot of woods. Number three, there's something watching these people that can move real fast. Love it.
Yeah. And it's cool because it's like, at this point, you don't know what it is. So it could be a creature. It could be a ghost. You know,
your imagination runs wild right now.
Yeah. And I love that because they don't really, like, the dialogue that comes up next sort of doesn't help tell the audience. It almost like gives you like a false sense of what's going on. Yeah, I'll let you continue and we'll cover it. But they say something that sort of like helps try to lean the audience a certain way.
Yeah, for sure. The family parks in front of the rather large brick mansion and exits the car. The real estate agent starts her little pitch as to getting these people to move in.
Are you sure you didn't say $1,000 a week?
Quite sure.
Furnished?
Indeed.
What's the catch?
Catch, Mr. Curtis.
Yeah, a bargain like that wouldn't stay on the market a minute.
Maybe there's a ghost.
Yeah, what self-respecting old English house would be without one?
Nonsense. The fact is, Mrs. Aylward, the owner, is a bit eccentric. She has no family left and she needs the income, but she is quite sentimental about the house and picky about who lives in it. You have a look around and I'll nip over to the cottage for the keys.
Why, is someone living there?
Mrs. Aylward. I expect that's why she wants to make sure the tenants are the right sort of people.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean? What's the right sort of people? What are we trying to say?
I knew it. When I saw that the first time, I knew you were going to say something about it.
It just feels gross, man. And like, I know I'm just like putting a bunch of modern spin on it, but it's like, what do you... that's okay. That's interesting. You know, I don't know. I love her. I love the older person's proper British English.
Yeah.
I love the way that they just speak and they just talk. I love it. I don't know why. It's just the accent gets me so much. The two kids. Yeah. The two kids, an older sister called Jan and a younger one called Ellie, talk about their plans if they decide to live in this big giant house. Jan warns her sister that she might have to save her from the wicked witch who lives in the woods. They laugh and Ellie turns and she kind of takes off. But as Jan turns to follow her, a large, sustained gust of wind picks up, blowing her hair and the surrounding bushes around like mad. The camera pushes into Jan's face slowly as she looks around, kind of scared, or maybe not scared, startled, probably would be a better descriptor. Finally, she takes off and the wind dies down. They've agitated something.
Well, because the wind in her neighborhood used to not be so rude. It would knock before it blew around like that.
That's right. It's not the right sort of weather pattern. The agent knocks on the cottage door to get the keys to the main house, and we meet Mrs. Aylward, a very old lady who seems crotchety as all get out. But when she spies the older sister Jan running around outside, she seems transfixed on her. She grabs the keys, and we get our first peek at the inside of this grand home. The agent is explaining the details, and Mrs. Aylward is just staring at the older sister, who handle it very well. Like, they're trying to walk in, and Mrs. Aylward's just giving her the old steam eyes, and Jan's like, oh, hi, what are you doing? I'm uncomfortable, but that's fine.
Yeah, and I can't honestly read if it's mad or like wistful.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It's definitely intrusive.
Yeah, like up at this point, it's like, it doesn't have a distinct, like, I'm mad at you or like you shouldn't be here, but it's also not like friendly, like, oh, a young girl, great.
Yeah, it's not kind.
No, certainly not kind.
Yeah. The kids split up from here and explore the different rooms upstairs. Jan approaches a window and looks out into the forest where she sees a kind of like a pulsing blue light in the bushes. I think it just hits once. Placing her hand on the window, because that's what else are you going to do when you see a pulsing blue light in the bushes outside of the house that you're about to rent? You put your hand on the window.
Yeah.
It cracks into the shape of a triangle, pricking her finger in the process. And from behind her, almost instantly, we hear Mrs. Aylwood asking, "Did you hurt yourself?" Which is creepy because we're in this scene for maybe like 25 seconds. And this old gal doesn't look like she has the stamina to clamber up the stairs like that. And then she starts asking odd questions of Jan.
Did you hurt yourself?
Oh, it's just a little cut. I thought I saw something out there in the woods.
What sort of person are you?
Well, it's hard to say, just average, I guess.
Are you adventurous? And kind? Are you kind?
I try to be.
And sensitive? Do you sense things?
Mrs. Aylwood, my husband would like to talk to you about the details of the lease. That is, if you've decided to let us live here.
I'm going to take a chance on you.
Okay, there you go.
Jesus. Can you smell the rain?
I know, right? Do frogs talk to you?
Can we take a moment and just say, we've already had floating like werewolf murder camera. And now right away, dude, that triangle pop was wild.
Yeah, they did a good job at it. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even
really
know
good
how
job.
they did that. And that's fine. I don't want to know, but I love that. It's just this beautiful blue bap.
Yeah, they did great.
Very scary.
They did a great job. So Mrs. Aylwood turns and leaves, and Jan asks if they can keep looking for another house because she gets a funny feeling about the vibes of this place, especially the cold feeling she gets out by the woods, which she was just out for about 20 seconds of her entire time.
Well, she
here.
also got hit with a gust of probably cold English wind. I get it.
Well,
It'd be cold
yeah.
too.
She says, like someone was watching her. Something awful happened here, and she can feel it, she says. So the family in the next scene, they're leaving the house and they're packing back into the car when the agent tells them that Mrs. Aylwood liked the family so much because the older daughter probably reminded her of her own daughter that went missing years ago. She would have been about the same age, of course, right? You can feel that line coming a mile away, but that's probably why. And as the car pulls away, Mrs. Aylwood comes to the door, looks out into the woods, and she says, "She's going to stay here. Is that what you wanted?"
Yeah.
Okay. And we're in it. We're like, okay, so is she part of this whole thing?
So eerie.
We don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that because that came out of nowhere.
No
I
way.
really like that because
Yeah.
up until then, you almost feel like she's just as much of a victim in this as anything. And then that moment where she has, because I thought she was talking to herself for a second, like, she's going to stay here,
Right. Yeah.
And
Aren't
then when
we
she adds-
excited?
Yeah. And then she adds that extra piece where you're like, oh, she's talking to someone else. Creepy.
Yeah. Especially just the woods.
Yeah.
We transition into the next scene with the family officially moving in. So I guess to hell with Jan's feelings about not being comfortable in this place, but whatever.
Also, it's fully furnished. Why are they
Fully
bringing their
furnished.
own stuff in?
Well, everyone's got something, I guess.
Yeah.
Mom is directing traffic and she tells Jan to put this very large and very ornate mirror upstairs in her writing office. And, not to be sexist, but it sort of looks like something Dad should be carrying. It is a big, heavy looking, ornate gold mirror. And
Yeah.
she's like, her arms are splayed out on either side. She's struggling to carry this thing. But, if it were me, if I was the dad, I'd be like, you can probably drop this. Allow me to help you at least. But she's got it, good for her. Jan positions the mirror on the desk. She steps back and then she notices that she cannot see her reflection in the mirror at all. Then the mirror cracks, just like the window did earlier in the very same triangle pattern, only this time we see a ghostly image of a blonde girl within the cracked portion of the mirror. She has a blindfold on and she's reaching out for help. And the soundtrack only kind of helps this because it's these creepy vocalizations. I'll play some of that.
Jan, you didn't. I don't know what happened. I wasn't even touching it. Mom, I couldn't see myself in it. My reflection wasn't in it.
What?
I couldn't see myself in the mirror. And then I thought I saw somebody else in it.
You know how old mirrors are? I never made a move yet without something getting broken.
Hey, that's 7 years bad luck.
Nonsense. I broke a mirror the day I met your mother.
I'm not sure that makes your point, darling.
The image presses against the glass from inside of the mirror, and it breaks again, as you heard, splintering into dozens of little cracks, and then the mirror falls down, and the scene continues. But what I really want to talk about is Dad's move-in fit for this scene.
Yeah.
He has what looks like corduroy slacks on. It could be suede. I really don't know. With a dress shirt on and like a red sweater over it with loafers.
Yeah.
And Mom is more sensibly dressed. She kind of has like a classic 80s mom moving time wardrobe, like t-shirt with an old dress shirt over it, probably one of Dad's, and like a long kind of skirt. And I don't know why I'm focusing on this, but he looks like he could have just either come from or going to the office while his family moves into this fully furnished mansion.
He's just popping in for a minute. He says, I'll move a couple of things, then I got to go, honey. I got a meeting at 10 with Tom.
Yeah,
but
I got to sit down and read the paper first, though.
I think our first piece of merchandise for Buena Vista Boys needs to be, Jan, you didn't. that's
yeah.
That line is so good. Not what happened.
No, but you
oh my
did
gosh,
it.
are you okay? Oh, Jan, you didn't.
Yeah, it's almost like chunk.
Like, how many times has she broken stuff in the house before? This isn't the first time.
No. So now it's nighttime, Matt, and we're in Jen's room as she's laying in bed reading a book called The Green Light, which is some British romance novel. I actually looked it up because I feel like in a movie like this, there has to be some symbolism. So, sometimes in movies, they read books that are sort of vaguely related or tangential to the story.
What about this one?
I don't think this was.
Dang it.
Yeah. And we see the triangular-shaped crack in her bedroom window still. She rolls over to get comfortable in bed, and suddenly a face pops up from behind the bed. It's green and has a big nose and yells, "Boo!" It's just Ellie in a mask, but it's a neat little jump scare. She takes her mask off, and Mom comes in and puts the sister to bed, and Jan settles in to go to sleep, but she hears something outside. Getting up, she heads to the window in time to see Mrs. Aylwood leaving her little cottage, holding a lantern and entering the dark woods. We fade into the next scene as Jen is in bed asleep. Her sister is muttering something in her sleep, and as she sits up, we can hear it. Door. Must open door.
Must open door.
Ellie? Ellie, wake up. It's okay. Ellie, wake up. You were dreaming. Talking in your sleep.
I wasn't talking. You were.
No, I wasn't.
Well, you're the only one here. Who else could it have been?
That's a good question. Jan looks very concerned about that, as it would anybody. You're the only one here. Who else could it have been, dummy? Wasn't me. I was sleeping. Morning is upon us, and as we enter the next scene, we're at a farm, selling fresh vegetables, eggs, and puppies. A handsome lad called Mike is working on a dirt bike, which doesn't seem very English to me. I don't know why. That really stood out to me. I was like, do the English do dirt biking? I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about this for a moment, because I was thinking about this earlier today. No, we're getting ready for the show, and I was thinking to myself, why'd they throw in the dirt biking at all? I mean, it's fine. It doesn't necessarily play into any particular theme, but it almost feels like young folk like dirt biking.
Yeah.
You know what
sure,
I mean?
dude.
Let's do something young in this movie.
Absolutely. And Jan is standing next to him, and, they were clearly talking. Ellie runs over, and she has this dirty-looking little puppy in her arms. And I'm wondering where the hell we even are anymore. We are just in this scene. Everybody looks like they know each other already, and it's the next day, that they haven't been here a full day, but they're already making friends, and I like that for them. That's great.
Do we know it's the next day for real, or is it like a The last movie where it's like time dilation, like you don't know.
Yeah.
Have they been in Dakota territory for a week, a year? What's going on?
I don't know. I'm assuming. That's the way that I work is I'm always going to assume it's just standard time.
Yeah.
Going
you saw
by.
night, now you see day. And then I'm in day.
It. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm a sucker for editing.
Okay.
We flip to the bad guy cam, right? The POV murder cam. And as it moves through the barn, what I like about this in particular, and this style of filmmaking in general, for this scene, is the audio design. When the camera starts off at this point of view, we don't hear anything, right? Save for the music. And as it moves forward through the barn, we start to hear the conversation that we just left in the other shot. So it kind of builds up from a murmur to us actually being next to the targets or whatever. It's a very effective way to instantly make you feel like you're the one stalking these kids. The problem with it is that it can be hard for me to tell at first when we are meant to be back in normal camera mode or still in murder, POV as it happens in this scene, because we're moving through, it's those classic, the camera enters like a doorway and then the people it's watching kind of walk by but don't see the camera, and then the camera like retreats a little bit, like, oh no, very Halloween Michael Myers kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
And then the next shot where it just cuts to POV of, or not POV, but like right next to Ellie's head. I'm like, is this the murder cam?
It's
like,
just
what are we?
Flat
what are we doing?
Camera.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. So I had to we just switched. We're not that other person anymore. So we're on Ellie, and she's staring blankly at a dirty window. Slowly raising her hand, she writes something in the dirt with her finger. Jen sees this and asks, "What's that? Like, what are you doing? This isn't your house. What are you even doing?"
So why is that window so dirty? It's nasty.
Now what's that?
The name of the puppy. Narek.
But what does it mean?
You ought to know. You whispered it to me.
I was talking to Mike.
Well, I heard somebody say it.
I've never seen you write like that before.
You think that's ring up and Mike will deliver whatever you
like
need.
that. I've never seen you write like that before. Backwards?
You mean all capitals and backwards? And
yeah. You had to say that?
Adult writing.
Yeah. So what she's writing is Karen. It's very clearly the word Karen spelled backwards. Like, it's not a question. I saw it and I go, oh, she's writing Karen. I don't know.
It's not even like they did like a couple of letter flips or anything like that. Or spelled Narek the correct way.
Yeah.
So that but then you could decipher it yourself. It's clearly for the next scene.
Yeah.
And they're just playing it off. I don't know.
So we're on Mom now as she's loading the produce in the car, along with Mike's mom, who's praising her son, telling our mom, because now she's our mom, how good a boy Mike is, and that if they ever need anything, just have Mike run it over to them. And I feel like Mike is being set up as the killer or the bad guy or the watcher in the woods or, whatever. I don't know why. Just that's the way I feel about it. It's like, why are you praising your good boy son who we just met, who has the tightest pants I've seen?
I also thought it was interesting. I took note of the fact that she sort of like overpraised Mike.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere in particular, but she was like, he's a good boy.
The goodest boy whatever has graced these golden hills. Or whatever.
He has his dark times, but he's a good lad.
Mid-sentence, Mike's mom freezes, and we get a sudden zoom in on the word Ellie wrote in the dirt. Only this time, it's the other side of the window, so we can read it, and it's Karen. While we aren't surprised by this, because we're all as smart as me, of course, Mike's mom sure is, and she is rattled and excuses herself, saying she left something cooking in the house. Okay.
All right.
Jan is telling Mike that they've never known anyone called Karen before, which is what a strange thing to say to someone. Like, it's the weirdest thing to even mention, because how do you know Ellie didn't have a teacher called Karen at one point? Or, do you know everybody that Ellie knows? No, you don't. Like, I could never, without a doubt, say my kid doesn't know anybody called Karen.
Yeah. That there's no Karen at one of my children's school. That's I can't
Especially
know
in
that.
the 80s. Yeah, I know, right?
Or like, oh, television doesn't exist. There's never been a Karen on TV ever.
Never. But Mike, being the sweet golden-haired boy that he is, offers Jen to be an ear if she needs to talk about it, which I thought very nice. And then I also was like, okay, I'm going to double down now. It's got to be the nice guy, Mike. We heard how nice he is. And now he's being really nice. He's got to be not nice.
Dirt Bike Mike is
Dirt Bike
dirt
Mike,
bag.
Man. Yeah. Just to put that fine point on how shook Mike's mom is, we see her rush into the house, shut the door, and whisper, Karen, while covering her face with her hand. So she's freaked out. It's murder POV time again. As we're whipping through the woods in front of the house, we're watching Ellie play with Narek, her new dog. Remembering that they are only renting this place for what I assume is a short time, it's pretty bold of them to get a puppy. If I were them, I would want to look over the lease agreement just to be sure that they wouldn't be in for some hidden charges at move out. Like, I just thought that, oh, yeah, let's get a puppy. Why not? You know, puppies aren't prone to, they're not known for pooping and peeing in corners when they're being potty trained and stuff like that. Let's do that with something we don't own.
First of all, that's a Karen Terrier. And I have one, and they're the goodest of boys and girls. They don't.
Wait, really? Are you serious?
Ever? Yeah, I have a Karen Terrier. That dog in this, when she first picked him up, that's exactly what my dog looked like when we picked her up for the first time.
Wow. So maybe that's why she's writing the word Karen.
Maybe. It's true. It's a Karen Terrier.
Yeah.
But those are the goodest of boys and girls. They're just super loud. They bark at everyone, and they dig the hell out of your backyard. Because that's like what they're made to do. They're rat catchers.
Oh, okay. I love that for people who own those dogs. Anyway, Ellie is running around outside, and suddenly we see a man in a trench coat step out of the woods, all ominous like.
Yeah.
He watches Ellie run after the dog, and then he dips back into the brush. Is this the watcher in the woods? I don't know.
Pervert in the woods.
Meanwhile, Jen looks out the window for Ellie and doesn't see her when she was just there seconds ago, so she's a little confused and concerned. She runs downstairs calling for her. Jen only finds this small red radio Ellie was listening to, and it's playing some of the coolest non-genre specific music I've ever heard in a long while. It's very bloop gloop sounding, and I pulled some because it's just so weird. I loved it. I love it. I don't know. I thought it was really cool, man. It's like, of course, what a 6-year-old would be listening to.
Yeah. Like from the Banana Splits.
Yeah. Just bloop glorp all over the place. Mrs. Aylwood is watching the whole thing go down from her cottage gate, and I have to think there's a reason for this. Why is she watching these kids? Other than to give Betty Davis more screen time, which, of course, Mrs. Aylwood is played by Betty Davis. We probably didn't mention that, but there it is. Maybe she's the real watcher in the woods. Matt, maybe that's what's going on. Because the whole time I'm thinking, who's the watcher in the woods? We follow Jan into the woods as she searches for Ellie, and the styling of these shots is really cool. There's a light fog, so the sunlight's cutting through it, creating these really sharp lines through the scene. As she heads down the hill, we follow her in murder POV, and that suddenly stops, but she doesn't. She keeps stomping through the woods, calling for Ellie, and there she is up ahead. They argue a bit about why Ellie didn't hear Jen calling for her, and Jan looks around at where they are, and then she looks up at the sun shattering the fog, and her whole mood changes. A weird kind of smile takes over, and the two girls stop arguing and start just kind of walking around, sort of dazed, but also exploring, clearly in some kind of trance. We hear this gentle singing or humming in the background, and it's actually so faint, I wasn't sure what I was hearing, if it was coming from like downstairs, like it was my family or whatever, but I was like, what? Man, whatever they listened to was weird. But no, it was coming from the movie. Ellie goes, "Oh, that song you're humming is very pretty." And Jan, who's just acting stoned, says she wasn't humming anything. At this point, Jen is standing on a log over a pond, looking again dazed and stoned, when a flash of blue light kind of sparks over the water just ahead of her. She bends down, and the blue light appears again, forming a ring. And it kind of looks an awful lot like the cover of the Germs album, but that's just my brain. It disappears, and Jan is suddenly freaked out, as anyone would be, I suppose. I mean, you've seen, two flashes of light and one forms a ring. Calling to Ellie, Jan shouts that she wants to go home. Something is wrong. And then another flash of light, but this time it's right in front of Jan's face. It startles her, and she falls backward into the water. Now, Jan's underwater, stuck on some old branches, and can't get freed, which that confused me, but I'm gonna chalk that one up to movie magic. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't understand how she got trapped. She fell backwards and then got trapped under branches. Whatever.
Well, that's like how Indiana Jones got his pack around that tank. If you remember that, right? And you're like, how did he fall off and get his bag around the end of that tank all of a sudden?
Yeah.
That's what this feels like.
When out of nowhere, Mrs. Aylwood arrives with a big old stick. Well, she shoves that stick into Jan's belly and pushes her deeper into the water. And you're going, what is she doing? Trying to kill her? Also, why is Mrs. Aylwood stalking these two girls? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Ellie is yelling at Mrs. Aylwood to stop, but she doesn't. And we fade out of that into the next scene with Jan in bed recovering. Ellie is standing over her, telling her that Mrs. Aylwood had to push her down in the water deeper so she could get free of the log that somehow was on top of her. Jan rises off the couch, and we're in Mrs. Aylwood's cottage. The old lady brings in some tea and tells Ellie to go fetch some clothes for Jan. Ellie exits, and we get some background on this whole Karen thing, like what's going on with that, who she is, and yada, yada, yada.
Mrs. Aylwood,
Yes.
is anything wrong with Karen's eyes?
Why'd you ask?
The night she disappeared. Was she blindfolded?
How'd you know about the blindfold?
You asked me once if I sense things. Well, I have. And Ellie's been hearing things. It's like someone is watching us. And the day we moved in, I saw something.
What?
An image in a mirror. A girl about my age. With long blonde hair. And she was blindfolded.
You saw her?
Not sure. Could you tell me what happened?
I can't figure out Jan's accent, by the way. Could you tell me what happened?
Was that line 80 yard where she goes, not sure? Like
Yeah.
her lips didn't move.
No, they didn't at all. No, absolutely not. Mrs. Aylwood goes on to say that her husband was killed in the war and Karen was all she had left. And by the way, this, I don't think it noted in the movie, but this happened 30 years ago. Karen disappeared 30 years ago. So it's a while back. We get a flashback of Mrs. Aylwood who goes looking for Karen for some reason. I kind of didn't really understand why, but she can't find her. She's running around the woods, around the church. That's kind of local. When I think it's lightning, but it was hard to tell, honestly, because the streak of light that we see in the flashback was kind of pink. So it was, I wasn't sure if it was supernatural or just kind of like, I call it a low budget special effect for the 80s. I'm trying to like go, okay, trying to excuse anything that doesn't look real as like, it's probably just kind of, a product of the times rather than maybe it was supernatural. I don't know.
A lot of that paint over.
Yeah.
A lightning that they used to do.
Fuzzy, kind of blown out. Yeah. So that hits a building and it catches it on fire. And apparently Karen was inside and her body was never found. So it's a mystery where Karen is or what happened to her. We're back in the present time. Mrs. Aylwood is telling Jan that Karen was blindfolded at the time because the kids used to meet at that chapel to play some kind of game. And we're still in the scene, but I loved the delivery that Betty Davis gives of these lines. So we're going to listen to a little bit more of this sort of speechifying.
Didn't the other kids know what happened to her? Why was she blindfolded?
They said it was part of the game. They used to meet in the chapel. Sometimes there seems to be something out there. Sometimes I hear someone whispering in the wind.
Mrs. Aylwood, what do you think happened to Karen?
I think she's still out there.
Just, I don't know, man. Betty Davis still got it.
Oh, yeah.
After that, we smash cut to Mom calling what just happened nonsense. Jan tries to explain that she really did see something in the water, and Ellie's theory that there is a ghost in the woods might actually be right after all. Mom is upset with Miss Aylwood for filling Jan's head with crap, and like any good teenager would, Jan gets mad and she leaves the table. And I'm thinking here about what I would do if this were my kid telling me she saw a ghost or something in the water. She felt something watching her. And I do this with a lot of movies, you know, where like parents don't believe kids or people don't believe other people. Like if my wife came to me and said like, no, like really there's something creepy and I'm seeing something, I think I would believe these people. I don't think that I would dismiss anything like that.
Yeah, I guess at best, like especially if it didn't happen to me and especially if it came from my kid, I would be like, I believe that you believe it. Why don't you take me to where it happened and we'll look around?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because it's like
just dismiss it offhand. Like, no.
Well, I mean, I don't live in a world where wind just picks up out of nowhere and like blue light is shooting triangles into shit. Like, so it's sort of like you have to understand how fantastic a claim can be. And then you're like, it's more your perception is wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's what, like, my wife believes in ghosts and I don't.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it is. But if she came to me and was like, dude, you don't understand. The faucets turned off and on by themselves and blue light cracked a window, I would at minimum say, okay, let's go get you an MRI.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? Let's do, because you got to have a tumor. Something is pushing against your brain and it's not a ghost.
When did you start day drinking? Like, this is what I need to know. No, but I agree with you. This is because I think about that too. If like somebody came to me with a fantastical claim, especially somebody close to me that I know is not outlandish, right? You know, like I would at least go look into what they're talking about. But you're right. I'm not a ghost person either. And so for somebody to say, I came downstairs and all the cabinets were open and it's like, I was gone for 2 seconds. There's no way anybody could have done it. I'm like, I believe that you believe what you're saying, but
I don't believe that
happened.
That exactly.
I don't think it happened the way you remember it happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The next day, we're at the local dirt bike track. Here we are, we're talking about dirt bikes again. In the middle of a very exciting race, I would imagine. I don't know. I'm not a dirt bike guy either. So like, what do I know? But I do remember growing up in the 80s, my neighbors were super into dirt bikes. So like this kind of like, I get this whole thing.
Dude,
you know?
and we have a track on the outside of town. So this is legitimate because like the little hills and stuff they're going over. That's what the dirt track looks like.
Nice.
That we have. So it's not, they didn't just throw something together for the movie. I think this is like a working dirt track for sure.
Yeah, I would bet. The family's having a picnic, and when I'm saying picnic, this is almost like the Gilded Age where they're sitting down, they pop a bottle of champagne and they have these very delicate little like champagne glasses. It's not like they're drinking out of the bottle or they got red cups or whatever. It's glassware with an actual basket. It's très chic. It's very very
the
cool.
English cannot unwind for anything, even dirt bikes.
Everything. See, and that's the other thing, that the juxtaposition of having these people drinking champagne out of actual glassware on the side of the hill watching a dirt bike race.
And like a race that's so caustic and crazy that people are just eating shit everywhere, just falling off their bikes and going nuts.
People screaming. Yeah. Jan and Ellie split off from their parents to go watch Mike race. And I'm wondering, at this point, I'm going, how are they going to spot him in a pack of like 15 dirt bike riders? You know, maybe they knew what his number is on his bike or something like that. Ellie spots him first. There's Mike, she cries out. And we cut to a rider on a bike with the name Mike written in
see.
bold black lettering on the side of his bright white helmet. And I looked around this whole scene. No other helmets have such a thing. Only Mike's.
Yeah.
And I love that for him. The simplicity of it all combined with the ego of it all is very striking, and I loved it.
Well, and you can see that helmet when Ellie gets her dog. It's off in the corner. It's a white helmet that says Mike. And you're like, I bet this guy's Mike.
I loved that so much. Everyone's just ripping around. They got numbers, and I'm dumb me. I'm looking around for his number or whatever. But no, it's Mike. There it is. That's him.
It's me, folks. I'm Mike.
Hey,
that's
guys.
That's how you know it's my helmet.
Yeah. Anyway, the two girls are standing on a rock watching this mess, and Ellie goes off with Narek because, of course, she's got to bring the puppy to the loudest place possible. She brings him to a small hill several feet away from where Jan was, and she sits down. We cut to murder POV for a couple of seconds, watching Ellie pet the dog, and then we're back to normal camera mode, close up on Ellie's face. It looks like she has a weird feeling, and as she sort of processes it, she calls out for Jan to come over quickly. Reluctantly, Jan obeys, and as she does, a huge accident builds on the racetrack, sending one bike literally flying through the air. It's not just like a little jump, it's soaring through the air. It lands on the rock Jan was just standing on seconds before, bursting into flames. Ellie tells Jan that it wasn't her that warned Jan, it was Narek, the dog. And as Jan contemplates this, we move into the next scene. So, Narek told Ellie that something bad was going to happen, and as soon as Jan moves, the bike strikes and blows up. Would have crushed her little head.
Well, now, how old is Ellie again?
I don't think they say, but she seems 7-ish, 7, 8.
So I have a 7-year-old, and so if at any point a dog turned around and talked to my 7-year-old, she would go, "Bruh, what?"
Yeah,
she would literally say, "Bruh, what? This dog be talking, dude. Like, this is nuts." Like, she would not treat it as a normal practice.
See, but here's the thing. And I'm only reminded of this today. So today, my kid, we're sitting around the dinner table, and it had some fundraiser thing at school. It was like a fun run or whatever. It doesn't matter. And they come back into class, and she's telling us a story about how she came back into class, and she goes, and then I was like this. And she stood up, and she kind of like looks off in the distance and looks like surprised, surprised look on her face.
Sure.
And we're like, why are you doing that? Well, why were you like this? And she goes, because I saw a white kitty in the tree at school. And we're like, what? That's pretty crazy. And she's like, yeah, in the classroom. And we're like, but you don't, was this imaginary? And she goes, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So you never really know unless you start prodding. And so maybe in some of these movies, they're like, she's just making it up. She's lying or whatever. But I also feel like kids will tell you. They'll be honest if they're making it up or not.
Yeah, they usually
Sometimes.
come clean at some point. Yeah, it's like if you, like you did, you kind of peel back the layers and you're like, now we understand.
Yeah. Also, she has 50 bunnies too, by the way. Imaginary. Oof. But yeah, you know, that's where we're at.
Where do you have room for all of those? Yikes.
We have imaginary other house that I'll live in.
Good.
Yeah. Mike and Jan are in Mike's truck. They're hauling his bike home from the race. Jan tells Mike it's been a crazy week, and Mike once again asks her if she wants to talk about it. Mike is so supportive. Ladies, if you find a guy like Mike, hold on to him. You know what I mean? They met like 3 days ago, and he's already there for her twice. And yes, it turns out Jan really does want to talk about it.
Mrs. Aylwood told me that Karen, her daughter, disappeared years ago when she was just about my age and was never seen again. If Karen was murdered, that would explain her haunting the woods, wouldn't it? Mrs. Aylwood said there were 3 kids with Karen the night that she disappeared. One was John Keller, and there was a Tom something. Collier?
There's Tom Colley. He lives in the woods in the old hunting lodge, kind of a hermit.
And there was a girl. Mary Pierce.
Mary Pierce?
Yeah.
That was my mother's name before she married Dad.
Uh-oh. Now things are getting interesting. We're in the kitchen at Mike's house now, and he is asking his mom why she never told him about what happened at the chapel with Karen and all the other, apparently local weirdos. Mom said this was years before he was born. And Mike hits her with the old, "But you never go into those woods to this day" line. So something happened, and Mom doesn't want to talk about it. And Mike asks her what she thinks it was. What happened to Karen? Mom says the only logical explanation is that Karen ran away from home. When Mike asks her what they were doing in the chapel, Mom gets a faraway look in her eyes and just kind of recaps what happened. What we already know, they were playing a game and a summer storm hit. But you get the feeling that there's more to this game that they were playing than anyone is really letting on. Back to Jan, and she's riding horses with Ellie and Mike. And so here, again, is it the same day?
Yeah.
I don't know. Go to dirt bike race in the morning. Parents are day drinking. That's why you drive home with Mike. And then now you're riding horses.
And again, back to Mike, like for as much as Dirt Bike Mike, it was sort of like set up to be maybe a possible bad egg at the beginning. It's like, he's fetching farm stuff. He can ride a dirt bike. He's now on 3 horses. Where'd he get 3 horses from?
Man, I don't know, but Mike is ticking every box. You know what I mean?
Yeah, God, he's a Renaissance man.
Yeah. They're romping along through the meadow, and we have some murder POV shots, but mostly it's normal camera mode. I guess to show us that someone is always watching these two, and I do feel that this is leading to be supernatural now and not human-based watching in the woods, because murder POV seems to be everywhere these kids are going to be before they even get there, and it moves really quickly. Mike has the bright idea to head back home through the woods. And as they start off, our friendly gust of wind is back, blowing the bushes ahead. All 3 horses flip out, and Jan's horse heads one way, and Ellie's takes off in the other direction. Now, Mike, ever the gentleman, rides after Ellie, of course, because she's the youngest, and she is tearing up the countryside. We see a truck up ahead on a collision course for Ellie and her horse as they're about to cross the road. Just as the 2 forces meet, a bright flash of light blinds the driver and he slams on the brake, narrowly avoiding Ellie and her horse while flipping his truck and crashing in the process. The driver, looking like a young Anthony Bourdain, climbs out and Mike takes control of Ellie's horse and saves her. But what about Jan? I'm glad you asked. Her horse rips her deeper into the woods, eventually throwing her off at the front of the old burnt-out chapel, which is the very same one we've been seeing in the flashbacks. So this is where the fire happened. But watching that scene where she gets tossed off her horse, I'm like, that looked like the actual actress, and I was kind of shocked. They're putting these kids through their paces, man.
They want their money's worth.
She walks into the chapel, and already I have a really hard time believing this place has been abandoned for 30 years. There's too much stuff in it, right? There's candle holders, crypts with really ornate decoration. The stained glass is still in place. Like everything's cool. I mean, it's dirty for sure, but this is why I would never be a good set decorator. I'd be wanting it to look absolutely just looted, just devastated inside, but that's not what they wanted.
Yeah.
Jan walks around inside and a beam of light strikes a stone crypt at the far end of the chapel. The pattern it makes is a bluish colored triangle, exactly the shape and angle of Jan's broken bedroom window. As she approaches the crypt, she sees the ghost of Karen laying inside it, still blindfolded. We get a cute jump scare as kind of a raven flaps out from its crumbled and burnt out cover, and the man in the trench coat is back, and he appears behind Jan at the back of the chapel. He doesn't say anything. She runs away, which of course anybody would. He gives chase, which of course anybody would. And as Mike and Ellie somehow find her, the man runs off. Mike saves the day again. That's twice in one day, man. Mike's getting it. Mike tells us that the man is Tom Cawley. Cawley? Was that his name?
Yeah, I think it's Cawley. Yes.
Cawley.
Tom
One of the
Cawley.
boys that was with Karen when the fire happened. So Jan takes Mike back into the chapel and explains everything that happened, everything we already know. Mike brushes it off, as he does. Our pal Gusty, the Wind Devil, comes back again, blowing through the chapel, knocking a rack of stuff over and shattering one of the stained glass windows. 2 circular pieces of glass roll across the table and land overlapping one another, like a Venn diagram, right? Jan is sure it means something, but she's not sure what. And I couldn't help but give her an internet connection and a 4chan account, and Jan would be red-pilled to the gills these days. You know, she's like she's seeing things and everything, man.
Yeah.
Making connections. The next scene has the man in the trench coat telling someone called Mr. Keller that he's seen something.
In the chapel she was.
You're drunk.
No, then I wasn't. She was there, I tell you. She come in and went right to the coffin and looked inside.
That's impossible.
Listen. It's thundering. There was thunder and lightning that other night, too. The night we...
Now, I've told you never to talk about that night.
All that time gone by. And her looking like it was yesterday it happened. How could that be?
Get hold of yourself, man. Now get hold of yourself. It's been nearly 30 years. Now, none of us could look the same, could we? Eh?
What was it I seen then? Has she come back from the grave to haunt us for what we done, Mr. Keller? Is it the ghost of Karen I seen?
Maybe. I don't know. I love this. I love this next scene. I should play it but it's so, I'm glad I stopped it here because it's so loud, dude. That scream. It's so loud.
I also love the fact that it apparently has not thunder and lightninged in Buckinghamshire since Karen's disappearance.
30 years, I know, right? Okay, so that happens, and we slam cut to Mike and Jan at a small but busy county fair. They're riding rides. They're having a hoot.
Awesome.
Then they enter the House of Mirror. Yeah, I love this. So, I mean, I'm bearing the lead a little bit, I guess, but like it cuts right from that last scene to like this ghoul, doll or whatever screaming. Yeah. And then Jan and Mike come out of like the spook house or whatever. Yeah. They're in a little cart.
It's so effective. This got me because that last scene was so low and slow,
quiet,
and kind of brooding. And then it just cuts right to this. It's a beautiful image. Look at that green. God, that's so cool.
Piercing scream.
Yeah.
But Mike's arm is over Jan's shoulder, or maybe the other way around. And he goes, works every time. And I'm like, yes, my boy.
Dirt bike Mike.
There you go, man. So they enter the House of Mirrors after that. Mike walks one way and Jan the other. Jan spins around a bit and everything is lovely. They're having a good time looking in the mirrors or whatever until she sees Karen's image reflected in all of the mirrors in this one room around her. Only this time, Karen looks real and not ghostly like before. So I'm wondering if this is escalating now. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
She runs out and straight into Mike and tells him that Karen wants her to help figure out what happened to her. Mike just isn't really buying it, and you get the sense that Jan isn't going to let this go. In this next scene, we find Jan riding her bike towards the large Keller house where Tom was earlier. And I'm not clear as to how Jan knew this place or knew of Mr. Keller, so maybe I missed something, and I didn't really get that. But at any rate, she tells Keller that she's been seeing Karen in mirrors and that she needs his help to figure this whole thing out, what happened to Karen. And he tells her to clear out. So, of course, she does. On her way home, Jan stops on the side of the road and enters the woods via a path. We get a murder POV again as the camera follows her along this really cool kind of wooded trail. Arriving at a burned out husk of a little lodge that we've never seen before, she ventures inside to look for Tom Cawley. She's having a gander at all the crap in there, broken chairs, filthy floors, standard hermit stuff. On the floor is a woman's shoe, a tan flat, and as she picks it up, Tom enters from behind her and does a really slow creep walk towards her, hand outstretched, not saying anything. Jan,
as one does.
For sure. Jan curls up on his bed, which I thought would be gross, and he keeps moving, finally reaching her and then gently touching her hair. His face lightens, and he's relieved that Jan isn't Karen coming back to haunt him, to which Jan wonders why Karen would even do that. After some prompting from Jan, Tom finally spills the beans on what happened. And we get a flashback, and in the flashback, we see Karen standing on that stone crypt that Jan was looking at earlier. As the kids do their little ceremony, the lightning strikes the tower, all three kids run out. Tom was last, and as he looked back to see if Karen was coming with them, the bell in the bell tower came crashing down. But right before it hits Karen, Tom says she disappeared before impact. And we get like a little point of view. Tom looks back. We see the bell fall, but we don't see anybody in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So we're back at Mrs. Aylwood's cottage, where she's showing Ellie an old music box that belonged to Karen. It plays a tune, which is the same tune apparently that Ellie heard at the pond when Jan fell in. The one Ellie thought Jan was humming, which is creepy enough. I mean, I did like that kind of like connection there. But as we get a look inside this box, we see that the little figure inside is a blonde girl in a white dress standing in front of 3 mirrors. Mrs. Aylwood is coaching Ellie to listen to the music and to try to hear that special voice that she hears, the one that tells her to do things. And then Jan rushes in and ruins the whole vibe for everything. She starts talking. Well, here, I'll just play this.
Look at the music box. Isn't it pretty?
In a minute, Ellie. There's something I have to tell Mrs. Aylwood. He said it was some kind of initiation ceremony. And he said there was a blinding flash of light, just like you saw. But when the bell crashed, Karen was already gone.
There was no other way out.
That's what Tom Colley said. The bell crashed. Karen was already gone.
Karen. Must help Karen. Must help.
No. We must listen. How can we help, Karen?
Door. Must open door.
What door? Where?
Chapel. Soon. Very soon. Help Karen very soon.
Karen, darling. Tell us how.
No, not Karen. But need help.
If you're not Karen, who are you?
Tell me what to do, Karen, please.
No, not Karen. Stupid, stupid, stupid.
Who are you?
Ellie, what have you done to her?
Wow, exciting stuff. Mom comes in right when Ellie collapses and says, "That's enough. They're out of there. They've had enough." And I get the feeling it was more because of Mrs. Aylwood was being weird rather than ghosts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Jan pipes up and says it's not Karen that's out in the woods. It's something else or someone else. And they want everyone to help Karen. That goes over about as well as you'd think. And in the next scene, the 3 girls are in the car. It's nighttime and it's pouring rain. It is absolutely dumping rain on these people. As the car makes its way slowly down the road, it kind of shorts out, lurching, stopping, stuttering, and then driving again, only to sort of repeat that cycle. Jan says that she thinks it is trying to stop them and that they should go back to the house to, finish figuring out what happened to Karen. The car stalls out on a small wooden bridge, and as Jan takes the keys, demanding they all get out of the car and off of the bridge, as they do, lightning strikes the bridge and destroys it, sending the car tumbling down like a cliff, I guess. I didn't really get that because I imagine where they are is just flat land, but suddenly the bridge was on a cliff.
That's the thing is, I don't think it was. I think on that side, I think it turned into almost like a waterfall style, like you were going over the very edge of should you build a bridge in that spot? Probably not. But yeah, I think there was like a little waterfall on the other side of that.
All right, didn't go down as far as I thought. But look, the model looked cool. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, it was rad.
The girls are back home, and Mom is tucking Ellie into bed as Jan is staring out the window, looking towards the woods, pleading with the entity in the woods to leave her sister alone. Mom shakes the ever-loving crap out of Jan, and then they hug. That's basically the TLDR of that whole scene. Gets shaken, man, hard.
Classic 80s mom. Just shake the crap out of your kids, and then I love you.
Yeah. Murder POV outside again, then inside, up the stairs, down the hallway. The music builds. We crouch down beside Ellie's bed, and she wakes up. Oh, no. It seemed sort of anticlimactic, but she wakes up. She gets out of bed, and she seems like she might be in a trance. Walking out of her room and down the hall, we shift focus to Jan, who's having a nightmare. She wakes up, looks over at Ellie's bed, and sees that she's not there. I guess the power is out at this point because there's a burning candle right by Ellie's bed. And I don't know if you saw this, but this made me upset The girl's pillow, like the corner of her pillow, is like 4 inches away from this open flame. What kind of parent? Like, yeah, here's an open flame, a burning candle. Let's put it right by your bed, and you guys just sleep here with it.
Yeah. Go to sleep and everything will be fine because you don't roll or move when you're sleeping.
Absolutely not, man. So Jan takes her own candle and follows some strange sound into the bathroom, where we find Ellie writing on the mirrors with a bar of soap. Backwards, of course. But lucky for us, we can see the reflection in the mirror next to it, and Ellie has written the words, "Do again tomorrow." Then Ellie says, "Nearly too late. Hardly ever happens." Jan makes a loud noise that pulls Ellie out of her trance, and of course, she has no idea what just happened or what any of that stuff means. So the next morning, Ellie's up, she's bouncing around. She's asking Jan where her thingamajig is to watch the eclipse that's happening that afternoon. It's a solar eclipse. And little does Jan know, she's about to start putting things together.
Dad says you can't look straight at the sun, or it'll ruin your eyes. I hope he gets here in time to see it with us.
Daddy's coming?
Uh-huh. Mom called him. Help me look, Jan. It's nearly too late. Nearly too late. Oh, here it is. That's funny. I looked in there before. We can all take turns using it. It hardly ever happens, you know. Hardly ever happens.
What hardly ever happens?
I just told you. The eclipse. There are lots of moon eclipses, but a sun eclipse is special.
What time does it start?
12:30. Oh, rats. When Mike did this, it came out elephants. Not Ring Around the Rosie.
Ring round the roses it was.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
I loved that scene. I thought it was pretty well done. We have the present intercut with some of the things we've seen before, and sometimes this gimmick is hard to make work in movies, but this film does a really nice job doing it.
Yeah.
I liked it. I thought it was really effective, especially the reactions of Jan piecing things together. I always think that's really hard to do in acting, is show that you have a thought without expressing it verbally.
Yeah, I thought that did a good job. And I also think that is like the correct way of somewhat hand-holding your audience to your idea.
Yeah.
You know, that just instead of expository dialogue of just explaining, I think that's a really talented way of getting your audience there too.
Yeah, agreed. So everything's clicking into place for Jan. She runs off, gets dressed, calls Mike to tell him about the circles and how they're meant to reference the eclipse. And the circle in the pond that she saw earlier meant a circle of people. Jan wants to get all the folks involved with Karen's accident together at the chapel. Tom, Mr. Keller, and Mike's mom, Mary. And all of this has to happen before the eclipse that afternoon. As Jan rides out on her bike, she runs into Mrs. Aylwood again. And, you know, again, it's just Betty Davis at her best. I have to play it. It might not matter too much about what's going on in the movie, but she does such a good job, man.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going?
I'm going to the chapel with John Keller, Tom Colley, and Mary Fleming. I want them to repeat the ceremony they held, linking hands like in a seance when people make objects move. I think that's what happened to Karen, and if we do it again, I know.
No. You mustn't do that. Whatever happened to my Karen could happen to you.
Mrs. Aylwood, I have to do it. Whatever is haunting Ellie and me will never leave us alone.
God be with you, child.
I just love, what are you doing? What is your quest? Jan hits up Keller and he tells her off, saying Karen is dead. She needs to leave it alone. Jan hits him with the classic, you owe it to yourself and to Karen. Then we're at the chapel with Jan, and Keller happen to show up because he realizes that he does owe it to both him and Karen. Just as the other three people arrive. Well, arrive maybe is too bland of a word. They are running like full sprint towards the chapel. Jan hears something. She looks out the little crack of the window, and these people are just sprinting, man. It's pretty hilarious.
Yeah. What did Jan say to get these guys to run full sprint to this chapel?
Well, she told Mike, she's like, everybody needs to come no matter what. Tell them it's life or death. But like, that still wouldn't make me haul patootie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't be running through the woods.
Now this tells me that Mike has some dirt on each one of these guys, and he used a little bit of Mike leverage.
Maybe, man. That would be sweet. We cut over to Ellie as she exits the house, putting Narek down and holding her thingamajig up to check on the eclipse. Smiling, she removes it from her face and continues to just stare into the sun for like a good 3 seconds. Even in 2 scenes ago, she was like, Dad says if you look at the sun too long, it'll hurt your eyes.
This girl thinks dogs can talk. So
apparently they can.
She's that kind of dumb.
Narek runs off, and Ellie, now permanently blind, no, not really, but she runs after the damn dog. And as she does, the wind gust kicks up and follows her into the woods. We're back at the chapel. Jan is spending her time trying to get the others to repeat that kind of like friendship ceremony that they were doing when Karen disappeared, because she thinks that's the key. That's going to break everything wide open and solve this whole darn thing, as if they just have to repeat the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're back on Ellie, who's still chasing the dog, and the gust closes in on their heels. Ellie stops, and a green light spills over her face. She enters her little trance state again, walking slowly forward. The eclipse is almost here, and they do a good job of showing it. You know, the moon moving in front of the sun slowly every now and then. It's getting closer and closer.
Nice countdown.
Yeah. We're back in the crypt, or back in the chapel. Jan is standing on the crypt while Keller is starting the ceremony again. And as he does, Ellie enters, talking very slowly and saying they need to hurry.
Willing you to be as one with us. We ask the question, is this person worthy?
Listen. Ready to return. I've been trapped on your planet. Karen in my dimension. We exchanged places by mistake. Magnetic pull of the eclipse transferred our positions. Now exchange places again.
Almost time.
Help me.
I must return home.
Where's home? What happened to Karen?
Continue. My power comes from you. The three linked as before. When darkness comes at noon.
The eclipse.
It's almost time. Hurry.
Go on to the ceremony, Mr. Keller.
As possessed Ellie urges them on, an orange fiery light covers Jan. She screams, "It's taking me!" And Mike, on the sidelines, is yelling at her to get out of the light. But she can't. And as she's slowly being lifted off her feet by some unseen force, Mike rushes her, breaking the ring of hand and knocking Jan out of the light beam. The light goes out, the wind dies down, and we get a close-up of the eclipse in its apex. And as the camera slowly pulls back, the moon is slowly moving back across the face of the sun, signifying the end of the height of the eclipse, right? So if the ceremony didn't work, it would be too late now. Fading back into the chapel, we see Karen standing on the crypt, blindfold on, and looking exactly as she did 30 years ago when she went missing. They did it! Huzzah and hooray!
Yay!
In wanders Mrs. Aylwood, tears in her eyes, and she says, "Karen, you're home." Tom helps Karen down, she embraces her mom, and we fade to the credits. So what I want to do is take a quick break, come back, because I want to talk about this ending, because there's also an alternate ending to this mess we have to talk about, and then I have questions about this whole, I got a lot of stuff to talk about still. So we're taking a quick break, and we'll be right back here with Buena Vista Boys talking about The Watcher in the Woods. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are about to dig into some final questions I have. But before we get to that, let's talk about the alternate ending. So not every movie has an alternate ending, although it does seem like a lot of horror movies at the time did have alternate endings, at least shot. I was looking on TikTok and there's some account documenting the alternate endings for Nightmare on Elm Street, which I thought was really fascinating. It's like, oh, that's cool. And like how they wound up with, using the ending that they used for the film.
And can you find those? Are those out there?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. I have to look at those.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So do us a favor. Tell us why this movie had an alternate ending of all things. Like it's hard for me to imagine.
So as best I can understand without going shot by shot in, because I won't go into the alternate ending like what was in it, but the reason it had to have one, audiences in that first release were just so confused. It demanded basically a reshoot and kind of a retool because people had no idea what was going on towards the end. It takes almost a complete 180 from the kind of like slow burn, gothic, almost like whodunit story, and just goes right towards Jupiter. I mean, literally.
At the end, instead of Ellie being spookified, is what I had written down here, and controlled by whatever it was, an alien, right? We see a large alien creature teleport into the chapel as the adults are chanting around Jan, who's standing on that crypt. It's like what you're saying. That is a complete 180 because you think, okay, it's either supernatural or it's a human thing, but you don't expect, an alien, more or less, much less to see the alien actually materialize in front of everybody's face.
And it looks like, folks, this is what I figured out. It looks like a rotten version of like Pete's Dragon that they use for like the Main Street Electrical Parade. Like if they turned the lights off and it had gotten burned up in a fire.
Yeah, it looked like the Maleficent from Fantastic. Yeah, it looks pretty wild, man. And it's also hard to really see any detail on it.
Yeah.
So it's this sort of like amorphous blue purple blob with wings.
And it has a basic mouth that you can kind of see, and he zaps Mike with his eyes. I know there's eyes.
Yeah. So Mike tries to call out to Jan, tell her to stop, but the creature zaps him with some eye lasers and he goes flying. I mean, he gets sent to the moon almost, man. And the creature wraps its wings around Jan, and the pair turn into a red ball of light and they zoom off. Suddenly they're in space and they're approaching an alien planet. And as the red ball is moving across the surface of this planet, the either side of the path is lined with pyramids, which is, I'm imagining it's kind of like a nod to ancient alien nonsense, or, pyramids are the gateway to the, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was pretty neat. Anyway, the ball lands, they reform, and Jan sees Karen trapped behind some kind of beam or something like that, like a tractor beam, I guess. I don't know. So she enters it and she turns from color to like black and white, like ghostly, like Karen is. She grabs Karen's hands that are outstretched. They hug, and then the two disappear, only to reappear in the chapel. And that's basically it. Jan walks Karen home. So everybody else is gone. Jan walks Karen home. And Mrs. Aylwood, so Ellie didn't even go, right? She's like watching the eclipse order. Jan walks Karen home. Mrs. Aylwood comes out, embraces her. Jan tells Ellie that the Watcher needed her image in order to save Karen. And then that's kind of it. There's pieces that I liked about this and pieces that I didn't. The alien was kind of clunky and weird, but I didn't mind it necessarily. I wished that it would have had a little more alien-esque hints in it, I suppose. But I liked the reaction that Mrs. Aylwood gave to Karen, because in the ending that we got, she comes in and she goes, "Karen, you're home." And Karen's like, "Oh, okay." Do we get to know if Karen realized that there was so much time gone, or like, why is her mom so old? But in the alternate ending, it seemed a little more like they were feeling each other out.
Yeah, they were sort of acclimating to this new reality that they're in with old mom and young Karen. Like there's more of a beat to it.
Yeah, I liked it a little bit more.
Yeah. I thought, except for the creature itself, like if you could actually retool that creature,
Mhm.
I thought that, and maybe not go into space. Like I saw I had an original alternate version that I sent you, and then I found this one that was even longer.
Yeah.
The first one I found had the creature in it, but they didn't go up to space. It was like the creature put his wings around Jan.
Yeah.
And then it was like all of a sudden, like Jan and Karen were back, like they switched places. They didn't go into space. And that was a cleaner cut. I actually kind of like that a little bit better because then you got all the other parts that we liked.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
It was like that moment where they went into space was a bridge too far.
Absolutely. Yeah.
A space bridge too far.
Yeah. So my original questions about the ending was, and like you said, I was like, people were confused. That's why they had to recut it. I was kind of confused. Who was the watcher in the woods? It was only until I saw the alternate ending that I was like, okay, I sort of get it now. But I was going, was the alien entity making itself known as the big gusts of wind? Was that the watcher
Casper
in the woods?
the friendly gust.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I guess that would explain how I was able to lurk behind Jan and her not see it, despite literally being in her periphery at times. You know, sometimes the camera's like, oh man, like for example, she's walking in the woods and the thing is like, you know, kind of 45 degrees off her periphery. I'm like, I've never walked in the woods all by myself and not looked behind me.
Yeah.
Ever in my entire life.
It's like, can it only like physically manifest sometimes? Was the watcher manifesting Karen? Was he the one projecting Karen into the mirrors, or was that Karen on her own?
I don't know. Right. So is the wind the watcher in the woods? Was it Tom watching over the animals in the woods, taking care of them the way that he couldn't do for Karen, which is part of a thing that I realize now I didn't explain, but that was Tom's weird little thing. Is he would stay in the woods and help the little creatures in the woods.
He earned that trench coat. He was the number one weirdo.
Dude. Yeah. Basically, this whole ending relied upon him coming forward. So Tom's kind of the hero, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
When Mrs. Aylwood tells the woods that Jan is going to stay there, did that mean Mrs. Aylwood knew about the entity pretending to be the wind? Why did everything crack in a triangle pattern? The window, the mirror, the beam of light later in the chapel marking the crypt. I was like, the triangle has to mean something. Oh,
yeah.
It's the three people linking hands. That's the triangle. I just figured it out.
I mean, yes and no. It's like,
what do you mean yes and no? What else could it be?
I mean, it has to be. Yes.
Yeah.
But then he does a circle pattern. What's the circle? Because the circle is the unbroken circle. But then they make a triangle.
Maybe the ghost didn't, or the alien didn't pass geometry.
Maybe the circle was supposed to be the moon. See, these are the things that.
Well, she specifically says the circle is meaning to be the circle of friendship.
Friendship.
Yeah.
But the friendship is a triangle because it's three people. So,
I mean,
come on.
Love is a battlefield, man. Why? And this is just more in general. Why can ghosts and spirits only speak in riddles? Why can't a ghost ever just be like, yo, help me, please? Like, this is what happened. Like, this guy murdered me. I need you to burn my bones so I can be free.
What I love is that scene with Ellie when she's like, no, not Karen. And then they're like, oh, Karen, darling. And she's like, no, not Karen. Stupid. You're all stupid.
I hate
you can,
every one of you.
It's great because when you go back and you realize that it somehow, whichever version you're looking at, that it is an alien entity. It's from another dimension, probably from a higher form of dimensional life. So it's very annoyed at this situation that he can't get you idiots, you idiot human dirt dwellers to understand what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, I would have loved it for this entity just say what it wanted. Just come out and say it. Why were the voices only talking to Ellie? And why did Ellie think it was the dog talking to her at times? Sometimes she said it was Jan, and other times it was the dog. Another question I had, why did the bright light in the woods spook Jan and knock her into the pond when she almost died, but then blinded the driver of the truck so he wouldn't hit Ellie on the runaway horse? There's just a lot of like things. But those are just dumb questions I had.
Well, and the blue light's inconsistent because why did it crack the window? Like that was pretty aggressive behavior, is just cracking that window, right? Like, especially when that life form would know, hey, this girl has no context for what's happening right now. Like, she's not going to know what a triangle means.
Yeah.
So, what the hell? Some of this, though, actually is going to be explained in my portion, because there's a little kind of explanation from the book that this movie comes from that kind of explains why Ellie only hears the voices and stuff like that. So we'll get into it.
All right, well, let's get into it. We're here.
Okay. Oh,
it's your time,
arrived.
baby.
Okay. All right. So this section is called Facts and Watcher Whatnots. So this movie was released in April 16th, 1980 at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York City. Like we said, it was pulled almost immediately for reshoots, and it was re-released October 7th, 1981 with that ending that we saw, or we talked about with the Lindsay coming in and being partially possessed and whatnot. Funny thing is that Mary Poppins was re-released to theaters to fill in the gap. May 23rd, 1980. They needed something in its place since they'd pulled the movie, and so they just popped Mary Poppins back out there.
Damn, dude.
Yeah. And the funnier thing is, I was looking it up. The budget for Watcher in the Woods was $9 million. That's 34 million by today's standards.
That's a lot.
And yes, and it made worldwide $5 million.
Oh man.
But I looked up the stats for Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins re-release made them $14 million.
So they made more money. Honestly, they made more money having to do the reshoots. Because if they didn't do if they didn't have to do the reshoots, they wouldn't have had to re-release it, and they wouldn't have done this. Damn.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
what a juggernaut.
Which, but that also kind of goes to like why people go, why don't you guys make new things? Because we make a shit ton of money off the old things.
Yeah.
Like they just re-released Nightmare Before Christmas back in theaters. I was looking it up, and it made $90 million.
No, stop it.
Look, you can double check my numbers, but that's what it looked like.
I'm looking. I'm not that I don't trust you, but I feel like that's wild.
See if it does. See if I'm right, because I was looking up the numbers for Terrifier 3 because it was like the #1 film in the country, and just under that, maybe I hope I'm right because I don't want to look a fool.
So I'm looking on it's just Wikipedia right now. It says the 2007, 8, 9, 20, and 23 reissues in total earned 15, 16, 30 million.
Okay. All right. I'm wrong, folks. Sometimes I can be wrong.
Hey,
but
man.
Anyway, they re-release it and it makes money. And that's the thing, because think about that. How much are they spending getting that back out there? It's a movie they've already owned for like 20 years.
Yeah. Now I'm just obsessed. I'm going to close that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's nothing, man.
And so, but yeah, I thought that was a very interesting factoid that just re-releasing Mary Poppins made them more money than this whole movie, this whole endeavor. So the movie is based off a 1976 book by Florence Engel Randall called A Watcher in the Woods.
Ooh.
And it's interesting because I looked up the very first edition. I found some screenshots of the first edition of the book. And inside it states that it is a science fiction book. That's the genre for the book. Yeah.
That makes more sense.
The book was later republished in 1980 by Scholastic Book Services with the name change of The Watcher in the Woods to tie into the Disney film.
Oh, tricky.
So yeah, so they retitled it. So this is an interesting piece from the book about the Watcher, and this is the book's Watcher, but it kind of goes with it answers some questions in a weird way.
Yeah.
If they were basing it off the book. A female alien humanoid child. She was described as having a pointy chin and upturned nose and wore a long flowing robe. 50 years before, her parents had taken her to a ceremonial coming-of-age ritual on their home planet in which she was to view Earth. But Karen, during her walk, was too near the portal when it opened and the two changed places. She is here as an observer and communicates with her race through telepathy. She is able to communicate with Ellie because they are both children. 50 years on our planet equals only 1 day on hers. Her attempts at communication are meant to convey that the door between both worlds will soon be open. The Watcher opts to stay until the next opening of the portal in order for Mrs. Aylwood to use the going forth to reunite with Karen in the aliens' home world. So in the book, it looks like instead of Karen coming back, Mrs. Aylwood goes to the other world.
To her, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
But yeah,
I kind of like that better, honestly. I mean, if you know it's a science fiction book, I like it as a science fiction book. But I really do like this movie as a creepy movie.
Yeah, and it's very interesting how the two genres really do come together. It really does have a great touch of the gothic horror, the Hammer film, you know, but then that ending with the and the little sparkles here and there of the blue light, that ever questioning sci-fi portion is very interesting, how they were able to sort of braid those together.
Agreed.
Yeah. So obviously we talked about this is filmed in England. The filming locations were primarily Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire, England, and everyone would know Pinewood Studios. It's a place where they shot Alien 1979. Star Wars 7, 8, and 9 were heavily filmed at Pinewood. Then also Superman 1 and 2, like the Christopher Reeve Supermans. Batman 89 had portions filmed there, and multiple James Bond movies. And finally, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, just to name a few. But I like that last one. It's kind of a really good, those little Disney ones there with Star Wars and Pirates.
Yeah.
So the house, because the house, it doesn't play a big part, but that house cannot be ignored. It's a beautiful home.
Oh, yeah.
It's St. Hubert's Manor, and it's near Ivor Heath, which is a parish of Buckinghamshire. And then the grounds around where the film was shot also was in Robert Wise's The Haunting. So it's a place called Eddington Park in Warwickshire. Lots of shires going on.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For Shire.
I went in, I was for Shire. Wah. But I was watching The Haunting, which I love. It's a great book and it's a great movie. And they didn't use the actual house because I was confused. I thought they used the house in this movie from that movie, but no, it is a very different house, but they use the grounds. There's 2 directors for this movie. Let's start with the first one, John Howe. I'm going to pronounce it Howe. And he is no stranger to supernatural thrillers. He directed the 1973 Legend of Hell House. So good. And once I found out about that, it made sense how this was so atmospheric and how he was able to make such great tension in a lot of these scenes. Legend of Hell House is a great movie. His experience with eerie and atmospheric building tension contributed heavily to the tone of Watcher in the Woods. It's very apparent. He was also the director for both Escape to Witch Mountain and Return from Witch Mountain. Yeah. And he also directed a grungy horror movie that I love called American Gothic. It's from 1987, and it stars Yvonne DiCarlo, who's the mom from the Munsters.
Oh, nice.
It's, dude, they play, it's her and a couple of these other people you would recognize from like old TV. And they're like this weird, almost inbred cannibal family. And they end up, killing these kids who get onto their property. Like they live on an island, and like these kids had an accident, these teens, and they kind of got onto this island, and this family takes them in, and then brutalizes them real good.
Nice.
But it's awesome. It's a great movie. So I mentioned 2 directors because the other director of this movie is uncredited, but the other one is Vincent Machiavetti. So Machiavelli is an uncredited director because he ended up directing the reshoot portion of this movie, right? So when Disney pulled the film from release to rework the ending and adjust some of the supernatural elements, as part of this overhaul, the studio brought Vincent Machiavelli, a veteran TV director known for his work on Disney productions, such as Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, Herbie Goes Bananas, and the final movie in the Medfield College trilogy, The Strongest Man in the World.
Wow. Yeah, I love classic movies like Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. Hey, McVetti, why don't you come in here and clean up this supernatural horror movie we made?
I know.
It feels a lot like Herbie Goes Bananas.
Yeah, remember when you filled that car's trunk with bananas? Don't do that in this one. The Machiavelli was brought in to direct the reshoots and oversee the re-editing of certain sequences, particularly to change the film's confusing conclusion and make it more accessible to audiences. However, since John Howe had directed the bulk of the film, Machiavelli was not credited as the primary director. His role was more post-production fixer, coming in after Howe's vision was already established. And so I thought that was interesting how this works, but apparently he contributed a significant portion to the movie, but because of the Directors Guild of America, there's certain rules about director credits, and he didn't qualify for one.
Yeah, sure.
And apparently that happens a lot. People come in and fix uncredited.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this I thought was cool. Deborah Hill, known for co-writing and producing Halloween 1978 with John Carpenter, was brought in as a producer to give Watcher in the Woods a more suspenseful and horror-driven feel. Her experience with horror significantly influenced the film's tone. And I love that. That's so cool to know that Deborah Hill had come in here and kind of put her touch on it. And I think this is an interesting connection. So horror buffs will immediately recognize Kylie Richards, who plays little Ellie Curtis. And Kylie also played Lindsay Wallace in Halloween, Tommy's neighbor girlfriend, she was being babysit by one of Laurie's buddies. And then she ends up sending her over to Laurie's house so that she can sleep with her boyfriend.
Yeah, for sure.
Ellie's the only original cast member remaining on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
I think it's funny. This little girl who was in probably the most pivotal and iconic horror movie ever, one of the probably top 10, you'd be generous.
Sure.
Is now on grew up to be on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Yeah, it's wild where people in famous horror movies end up the way their careers go.
Yeah. Also, Paris Hilton is her niece.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that wild? I don't know, man. Hollywood's weird, dude. That's all. I love a Paris Hilton fact, so I got to do it.
So many connections.
Yeah. All right, go ahead, please.
All right. The movie's cinematography was overseen by renowned British cinematographer Alan Hume, who played a key role in creating the film's eerie and atmospheric tone, using natural light and shadow to build suspense. He went on to work on major blockbusters, including 3 James Bond films, For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, and A View to a Kill, where he showcased his skill in capturing action in exotic locations. Hume also worked on Return of the Jedi, contributing to the epic Battle of Endor scene.
Wow, nice. Love it.
Yes. Forest Moon of Endor scene.
Yeah, how dare you?
I think somebody who we've talked about a lot, but we've still never talked about enough is Bette Davis, obviously. She played the role of Mrs. Aylwood in this movie. And Davis's career actually started in a movie called Bad Sister back in 1931.
That sounds like a movie you have to go behind a curtain to rent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and it's like, if you look at her career, she has just a slate of movies where she's playing either a bad person or a wicked mother, or, you know, she has a lot. She's been bad for a long time.
Hell yeah.
She's good at being bad. One of her most modern notable roles was playing opposite Joan Crawford in 1962's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Did you ever watch that?
No, never seen
that
it.
movie's good. Oh man, there's a funny meme that goes around. But you are, Blanche. You are in the chair. She's great in that movie. God, she's terrifying. Betty Davis came out of semi-retirement to star in this movie. At the time, she had been mostly inactive in the film industry, with her career slowing down significantly since the 60s. And I looked at her IMDb, and I do believe that she probably did come out of some semi-retirement for this movie. But semi-retirement to an actor is very different from retirement or semi-retirement of other people. Like, she was still doing things, a lot of TV movies. So she wasn't completely retired, but yeah, from large production films, she had been taking a break.
Yeah, I think there is a difference between TV movies and movie movies.
For sure.
You know, for in acting wise, and especially if you've been doing it since the 30s, you can't, you don't know anything else. You're going to do it till you croak, man.
Mm-hmm. And the reason they reached out is because she's such a prestigious legend, they wanted to add credibility to this movie. So they wanted to get somebody who had gravitas to, and who had the chops. And from her playing in different psychological thrillers, including Baby Jane and including Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte, she was a perfect fit for this. Like, she's very good at being in thrillers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lynn Holly Johnson, who played our intrepid Jan, our blonde Jan, was a professional figure skater and had won several international competitions. Disney had previously cast her in The Ice Castles, 1978, due to her skating skills. You know, you've actually probably seen her in the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only, when she played the young skater who had a crush on James.
That's what did it for me, because I remember that, because, like, I mean, how do you forget that? It's just a classic scene. And anytime I see anybody who has any sort of skill beyond acting, I always wonder, like, are they an actor who learned how to skate, or are they a skater who learned how to act? And I remember this, you know, because I used to watch James Bond films a lot. And I remembered this scene in particular where she's like hitting on him, and, you know, he's like, I'm not really, you know, I'm like, oh man, God, is James Bond going to go for this girl who's like 40 years younger than him? And he doesn't, but I think he wants to, because she's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I read that. I was like, oh my God, that's right.
I do not remember that scene. So that is a great pull.
Oh man.
Now, one thing I do remember, one of the basically, besides Betty Davis, the only character that I recognized right away was David McCallum, who's plays the father in this, Paul Curtis, right? And
by the way, where does he go in the movie? He just, like, at some point he's like, yeah, I gotta go work, and then he's gone. He's not,
because he's shuffling the papers, right? He's shuffling, and he's like, if I don't go, we're not going to have 8 oboe players and 5 cellists and 3 dancers aren't going to have any music.
And then he's gone. And then Ellie says, yeah, Dad's coming. And then he doesn't. And then it's just, he's just never seen again. He's on screen for maybe 4 minutes.
They ran out of David McCallum money. Sorry, I don't. Oh, that's as much as you had? Okay, well, write me out.
The sexual tension between him and Betty Davis was too much offset, so they had to
get him out of here. Yeah. No, but a lot of this, I think this is very funny. It's interesting how this kind of stuff happens, because so David McCallum plays Paul Curtis. A lot of people would recognize him from NCIS, where he plays a character named Donald Ducky Mallard. He's a lot older now, so he does look a little different, but the voice is absolutely still spot on.
Wait, I don't think you said the name of the show that he played.
Oh, NCIS.
Okay.
Have you ever watched that show? See, my dad used to watch that all the time, and I recognized his voice and face right away from that show.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it's interesting that McCallum's character was a musician in the movie, perhaps drawing from his real life experience. David McCallum's father, David McCallum Sr., how original, was first violinist for the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and his mother, Dorothy Dorman, was a cellist. And so it's not surprising that David was originally headed for a career in music. playing the oboe.
Oh, nice.
He studied briefly at the Royal Academy of Music. He left that, however, for the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art.
Yeah, see, that's why you can't put them across the street from one another anymore. You got to move across town.
I know. All the good-looking ladies are over at the Dramatic Art. He's like, I'm going to go check out what's going on here.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting because they made him a musician. I don't honestly think it had necessarily any bearing. It's just funny that he was going to become a musician in the first place. So we got to talk about Helen Curtis. That's the mother. Carol Baker. She has a long list of credits on IMDb, but looking through them, nothing stood out that I thought the audience would care about. I mean, it's pretty milquetoast stuff, except for one movie called Hitler's SS, Portrait in Evil.
Hell yeah.
Where she plays a character named Gerda Hoffman.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, sadly, I could not find a connection to the Twilight Zone anywhere in this movie.
Damn.
And God knows I tried. So, for the Halloween episode, I thought it just as appropriate to tie in a Tales from the Crypt episode. Carol Baker is in an episode of Tales from the Crypt, season 3, episode 3, called The Trap. Okay, Benedict Taylor, who played Mike, went on to play Fighter Pilot Bravo 2 in Phantom Menace. In 2017, Watcher in the Woods was remade as a TV movie, and Benedict played John Keller in it. That's really cool.
That is cool, man.
I love that it came back around.
Yeah.
And man, that was directed by Clarissa Explains It All.
What's her name?
Melissa Joan Hart.
There you go. That's cool.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, I thought that was a interesting thing for her to want to remake. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then my final piece, because I know we're rounding out the night. The original sci-fi creature intended for the ending of Watcher in the Woods was the brainchild of visual effects artist Harrison Ellenshaw, known for his impressive work on the films like Black Hole, my man, and his iconic matte paintings in Star Wars. Ellenshaw was tasked with designing an extraterrestrial being referred to as the Watcher that would feature in the movie's original climax. His concept for the creature was inspired by an alien, insect-like appearance meant to enhance the film's otherworldly and science fiction aspects. And I think it did okay. It did all right.
I think so too. Yeah, absolutely.
That is the Watcher in the Woods.
I love it. I have a couple things I found too, just in my little passings that I thought would be interesting for everybody to listen to. This is, I believe, from a audio commentary on the DVD. Who's saying this? I don't know who's saying this. I apologize, but quote, when the film was pulled from theaters, because we were talking about how, the ending needed rework. Several new endings were penned by various writers at Disney to substitute for the original. In addition to the work of studio writers, a number of science fiction writers like Robert Silverberg, Joe Haldeman, and the Niven Purnell team, whoever that is, all working separately, were brought in and paid for alternate endings, but apparently none of those were used. Harrison Ellenshaw, which you just talked about, the visual effects designer, later stated that there were roughly 152 possible endings that Disney could have used for this movie. They paid all of these people, and they had 152 options, and we got the one that we got, man.
Yep. Great.
Yeah, which was written by Ellenshaw. According to the director, John How would you pronounce it? How?
I'll say How. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Betty Davis apparently desperately wanted to play not only her part as Mrs. Aylwood, but the Mrs. Aylwood in the flashbacks from 30 years ago.
Fantastic.
When I saw, so Betty Davis in this is 72. And when I saw it, I could have swore she was pushing 90. Like she looks very old.
Yeah.
So apparently the production crew was like, okay, fine. It's Betty Davis. What are you going to tell her? No. So they fly in the production crew. They fly in makeup and hair specialists from LA over to England to work on Davis in preparation for screen tests. The goal was to reverse her age appearance by 30 years. After the screen tests were completed and viewed by the crew, Howe was concerned about Davis playing the younger character and felt the makeup and hair work had, quote, maybe knocked about 20 years off of her age, but not 40. Upon viewing the tests, Howe cued for the crew to leave the screening room and said, Betty, I don't think you've made it. After taking one long drag from her cigarette, Davis replied, you're goddamn right. I mean, you know your own limitations, man.
Oh man.
I would
she
love
was
to
really
see
trying
that.
to she was trying to get that double pay.
Absolutely,
and I
dude.
applaud her. Yeah. She's like, I'm 72. If I can play both these roles.
Yeah, dude. The only other thing I saw, so there's a couple of interviews here and there where people are talking about maybe some on-set tensions between producers and the crew. And of course, Ron Miller, who's the son-in-law of Walt Disney, who was married to Diane Miller, he apparently would often intervene with the production to tone down intense scenes, which led to, quote, unhappy compromises between him and the filmmakers.
Yeah.
So I wonder kind of what this would be like if Ron Miller hadn't put his meaty little sausage fingers all over it.
Well, it might be worth one of these days because Ron keeps coming up in our movies. It might be worth having like a little like Buena Vista Boys chat session just about Ron Miller and like his work kind of as a producer, for good or for bad. Like, how's he doing?
Yeah. Yeah,
that'd be fun. I don't think he's a bad producer. Like, I think he made some okay stuff, especially at the time and with what he had to work with, because we talked, I think, briefly about some of the constraints, that Disney had when making movies. They couldn't go too far outside their wheelhouse.
Yeah. Which is why I'm so surprised that this movie was as dark as it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I really feel like with what Disney was letting them get away with, they really pushed the boundaries of what a Disney movie could be. And obviously I haven't seen them all, but I couldn't think of one that doesn't, like, if you didn't know this was Disney, it doesn't read like Disney. And I was looking at some of the reviews at the time when it came out, and a lot of people were like, it was really good up until it ended with everybody being happy. Nothing was lost. Nobody lost anything except maybe Mrs. Aylwood lost 30 years with her daughter, but her daughter kind of is the winner of this whole thing. Not only was she on a friggin' alien planet, but she got 30 years of her life back. She's still a teenager. That's awesome. Everybody wants that. So she's the winner.
It's almost like Jan should have had to actually take her place, and she didn't know.
That's what I thought was going to happen.
Me too.
But then it wouldn't have been satisfying. Or maybe like Mrs. Aylwood could have jumped in and saved Jan, and then she got, I don't know, something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying though about loss. Like, that is one of the hardest parts about Disney movies, and a fair criticism. Everything usually resets to neutral, like in TV, and there does need to be a loss. That's like in the book, how we just talked about how Aylwood went to the other planet.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a bad ending, right? Because the sacrifice was made. She doesn't get to be on Earth anymore.
Yeah. Or or at least when she comes back, she's not the same. So there is a sense like she lost some time. Karen is now, 30 years older.
Or her mind's like blank almost. And
something. But you can't have that. That's too much, right? For a Disney movie anyway. But that's what I mean. Where it's like, I wish, I don't know. I wish this movie would be redone with well, actually that's not even true, because I really like it. I like it. It's just it's 98% there. And then the ending, you're like,
a lot of the
it's okay. That's the other thing. The ending isn't bad either. Like, I don't want to put anybody off from watching this. This is a fantastic movie. But maybe not fantastic. Maybe that's a little hard. But
calm down.
It's great. It's good. You should watch it for sure. The ending leaves a little much to be desired, but it's still roughly satisfying if you just like a happy ending.
It is an absolutely satisfying movie. Yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it. It is a satisfying watch for sure, ending and all. Yeah. And you can kind of see, I want to make mention of this, is that this is that era where, roughly 5 years later, we have The Black Cauldron come out. But I think it was being worked on probably only a couple of years after this movie came out too. So there's an interesting period in Disney history where the idea of doing something darker was permeating.
Yeah. Which is also interesting because none of it landed well, and it had to be redone constantly. So I think Disney, they were pushing it. Then they realized it's more trouble than it's worth. And we're going to stay out of it.
They went back to Mary Poppins, which makes money.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Matt, great job, of course, as always. Thank you, everybody, thank you to everybody for listening to the show and sticking with us through the end. I liked this. Hopefully it meets your Halloween standards. And if you catch this before Halloween, definitely give this a shot. It's a good movie. I wouldn't watch it with anybody younger than like 10 or 12 maybe, but that's up to you guys. I mean, they're
and I would try to really cozy in and watch it with no distractions. I think that's going to be the bang for your buck, is really settle in on it.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Absolutely.
Let's see what else. If you want to watch us do this live, you can follow us on Twitch. Just search Ears Up. It's twitch.tv/earsup, EARZ. And throw us a follow there, and you'll get the announcement right before we go live. And we don't really know when we're going to do it, but if you're on the ball and you get the notification, you can come hang out. And what we do is we have video clips of these things too, so you get to see a little bit of what we're talking about.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's about it. Matt, what do you got going on?
Well, really, you can follow me also at my other podcast at Shelter from Oblivion. We're on Instagram and Facebook. Andy and I are putting together some sort of small Halloween show, and it's going to be a little kind of a Halloween remembrance. We're going to talk about the good old days and stuff, and that should be pretty fun. It's going to be like right at Halloween, basically. Like on Halloween night, you'll be able to download it probably.
Hell yeah, that'd be great.
But that'll be fun. I love Halloween. It's my favorite time of the year. It eclipsed Christmas like multiple years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. It's still hot here though. It's still warm. It's 73 inside, which is fine. But like, it doesn't feel like Halloween. Like my wife and I are walking to pick up our kid today, and I'm like, it doesn't feel like it should be fall.
Yeah,
because we're wearing shorts and I don't know. It's just like it doesn't really. Whatever. It doesn't matter. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in, and till next time, we'll see you later.
Yeah,
I gotta pick a better.
Bye, guys.